Let's talk about a massive, yet often overlooked chapter of American history. It was a deal born from a global crisis that completely reshaped the country's farms, its economy, and sparked immigration debates that, well, are still raging today. So to really get this, let's start with the name itself, Bracero. It comes directly from the Spanish word brazo, which means arm. Right from the get-go, the name tells you exactly what this story is about: the manual labor these men were brought here to perform.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1942. The United States is deep in World War II. Millions of American men are overseas fighting, and back home, there's a huge labor shortage, especially on the farms. To solve this problem, the US and Mexico struck a landmark agreement.
Now, you gotta understand, this wasn't some informal handshake deal. This was a formal government-to-government pact. And the contracts came with some very specific promises. Things like guaranteed wages that matched what local workers made, health care, decent housing, and even protection from discrimination. On paper, it looked like a perfect solution. And hey, if you find this kind of history fascinating, do me a quick favor and give this explainer a like. It really helps the channel grow.
And the scale of this thing, it was just immense. Over the 22 years it was active, from 1942 to 1964, the Bracero Program issued almost 4.5 million contracts. We're talking millions of Mexican men traveling to work in 24 different U.S. states. They literally became the backbone of American agriculture.
But as you can probably guess, those promises that look so good on paper, well, they often crumbled when they met the reality on the ground.
The agreement was crystal clear, right? A minimum wage of 30 cents an hour, protections for living conditions, a guarantee against racism. These were the basic rights every single bracero was supposed to have from day one.
The lived reality, though, for many, it was a nightmare of exploitation. Widespread reports of underpayment were just the start. The housing was often disgusting, unsanitary, leading to things like a massive food poisoning outbreak in Oregon that sickened 500 workers at once. They faced racist attacks, were banned from whites-only areas, and at processing centers, they were put through these dehumanizing procedures, including being stripped down and sprayed with the dangerous pesticide DDT. But the braceros weren't passive victims. They fought back, organizing dozens of labor strikes to demand the rights they were promised.
And if you're wondering how this could happen, well, this quote from an actual report published in 1953, it tells you everything you need to know. It reveals the deeply racist and dehumanizing mindset that was used to justify the abuse, framing exploitation as something natural, something these men just accepted.
But the story gets even more complicated. The program had this massive, unintended side effect, one that would literally change the course of U.S. immigration policy forever. The stuff we're getting into here is complex, so if you appreciate this kind of deep dive, let me know by dropping a comment, and hey, please subscribe to the channel. Just look at these numbers. It's wild. While the legal Bracero program was in full swing, the number of undocumented workers being caught by the INS just skyrocketed. It jumped from 30,000 in 1944 to over 100,000 just 2 years later. Officials at the time were calling it a virtual invasion. And here's the crazy paradox. The program itself was basically a training ground. Former braceros already knew the employers. They knew the routes, they knew the work. So a lot of them just figured, why bother with the official system, which was often corrupt and a huge hassle? They just came back on their own.
So, faced with this rising tide of undocumented immigration, a situation the Bracero Program had helped create, the Eisenhower administration decided to launch a massive military-style deportation campaign in 1954.
Now, a quick but really important note on the name. We're using the official historical name for this operation, Operation Wetback, to be accurate. And it's crucial to understand that this term, which we now recognize as a disgusting slur, was the actual name chosen by the U.S. government. That alone speaks volumes about the racial attitudes of the time. The numbers from this operation are just staggering. The INS reported that about 1.1 million people left the U.S., either because they were forced out or left to avoid being deported. And tragically, this roundup didn't just include undocumented workers. It also swept up some U.S. citizens of Mexican descent. It's a staggering number. If this explainer is giving you a new perspective on this history, please take just a moment to hit that like button. So the program starts as this temporary wartime fix, gets formalized in 1951, but after years and years of controversy and a ton of pressure from labor unions and civil rights groups exposing the abuse, the U.S. Congress finally pulled the plug in 1964. But even though the program officially ended 60 years ago, its legacy is all around us. You can hear its echoes in everything from our food supply chain to our most heated political debates. You can draw a pretty straight line to today. The current H-2A visa program, which brings in temporary farm workers, is seen by many as a modern successor, and the parallels are kind of chilling. Critics point to many of the same exact issues, reports of worker exploitation, dangerous conditions, and big concerns about how it affects wages for domestic workers. When you look back, the program's impact is so complex. On one hand, it established the large-scale migration networks that still exist. And get this, studies actually found that ending the program didn't really raise wages for domestic workers. Instead, it just pushed farms to buy more machines. And on the political side, the legacy is stark. Operation Wetback has been brought up in modern politics as a potential model for mass deportation.
You know, we're able to put these explainers together because we believe understanding this history is so important. If you agree and you want to support what we do, the best way is to like, comment, and subscribe for more. It really makes a huge difference.
So, the Bracero program might be over, but its legacy, this tangled web of promises, exploitation, and unintended consequences is far from it. It forces us to ask some really tough questions that are just as relevant today as they were then. Where does our food come from? How does our economy really work? And maybe most importantly, what value do we place on the human beings whose labor sustains it all?